Hi, my name is Will. I am a digital curatorial archivist on this project, along with my colleague Nidhi Shukal. And part of our role in bringing this world of internet video into the archive is to catalogue those works. And that includes assigning these works a genre term. Now, one of the sort of problems we've confronted when we do this is that obviously there's lots of areas of the internet that aren't going to be represented in the catalogue of genre terms that were developed for TV and for film. There's no ASMR in the archive, there's no Mukbang in the archive. And also, maybe more surprisingly, there's no video essay as a term in the archive. So, we had to try to define what these terms mean. And when you start pulling these terms apart, you can quickly, if you're like me, kind of spiral a little out of control. What is a video essay? Well, it depends on perspective. It depends on who's asking. Well, who is asking? I'm asking. Well, who am I? And that's no good. So instead of like falling inward, either to my sort of existential crises or inwards as an institution, we're going to try to look outwards and engage with the sort of creators and the communities who so appreciate these works of film and internet video. So today, myself, the panelists and yourselves are going to try to define what a video essay is so that we can catalogue it accurately, so that people in 100 years from now can come to the archive and discover what it is that they're looking for. I'm going to bring up my panelists after watching a clip from one of our panelists, Grace Lee, her video essay, What Isn't a Video Essay? So we'll watch that now, and it's about 3 minutes, so please enjoy.
A genre. Which films are genre films? How do we know to which genre they belong? As fundamental as these questions may seem, they are almost never asked. Well, Rick Altman, if that is your real name, things must have been more easy-breezy in 1984 than George Orwell had us believe. Because I, for one, would love to live in a world without Is Die Hard a Christmas movie discourse, but that ship has sailed, Rick. And as the roaring 20s roll round again, these endless undead debates continue. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a tennis ball green or yellow? Is butt legs? But of course, humans have always been categorizing. From Aristotle's first organization of literature into tragedies and epics, to me trying to prove I'm not a robot. Which actually kind of implies that the ability to identify and categorize is what makes us human. But even at this most rudimentary level of categorization, thanks to these narrow edges and technicalities, I'm rarely confident of my selection. And if I can't even be sure I've selected all the boxes containing pipes, can any category go unchallenged? As film theorist Christine Gledhill writes of genre, it is first and foremost a boundary phenomenon. So, not surprisingly, the process of establishing territories leads to border disputes. Like, what's a video essay? Or, at this point, what isn't a video essay? You might think, I know what a video essay is. You pick a David Fincher film, you write some narration about, like, camera angles, add some lo-fi hip-hop beats to video/essay 2, and you're away. I mean, ideally you're using Premiere. I don't know what kind of loser still edits in Sony Vegas. But really, haven't we learnt that when attempting any kind of definitive taxonomy of anything, we should just not? Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein first pointed out that there's no characteristic common or unique to everything that we call a game. And that was in 1953, and the science really hasn't moved on. But then, I'm not really interested in creating a taxonomy, a list of symptoms where ticking off at least 6 would qualify for a diagnosis. I'm kind of inclined to agree with what Rick Altman referred to as American pragmatism. Why bother to theorize when there are no problems to solve? We all know a genre when we see one. Scratch only where it itches. But this is what gets me. Because, do we? There seem to be countless occasions where two people can see the same thing but know it differently. But still, the itch here isn't why is something this or that, but why do I get upset about it?
Okay, so can we introduce Grace Lee, creator of the YouTube channel What's So Great About That? Lee Singer, film critic, video essayist, and lecturer on video essays at the National Film and Television School. And Natasha Fairburn, an information specialist at the BFI archive. Also, I just want to give full credit here. Member of the FIAF Cataloguing and Documentation Commission and co-author of the FIAF Moving Image Cataloguing Manual. So, thank you for that. It provoked in us a lot of questions that have been really helpful in pursuing these sort of area of the genre in the video essay. So I want to start with when we kind of survey this world of video essays, which for us can go all the way back to sort of Chris Marker in the 50s and all the way up to these kind of 4-hour epics that are on YouTube now. Where did you sort of move into this genre, and how did you start making those videos, I suppose?
I think when I started, I certainly wasn't aware of video essay as a term. I think that was, maybe that's just my perception that it was quite a new thing. I wasn't aware of it, but I'd seen Every Frame a Painting on Vimeo and Lindsay Ellis, I believe on her own website at the time. I don't think I'd even realised, I wasn't really aware of YouTube. I started putting videos on YouTube because I already had a Vimeo account for like animations that I did. And so I was like, well, I already have a Vimeo, I guess I'll make a YouTube account so that I can keep them separate. But I think it was, there weren't long video essays at the time. It was very much a 10-minute, potentially there was still the restrictions on how long, probably not technically how long they could be, but there was very much the sense that no one's going to watch anything longer than 10 minutes, like keep it short. Which I think why one of the reasons I talk so fast in the videos, one of the reasons it's moving so along so quickly, is I'm like, I need to keep people's attention, which is very much something that emerged from the YouTube ecosystem, I think. So when I started, it was very film centric. A lot of the stuff that I put on my little joke list, like, I feel like that's not so, because this was in 2020, that's not so relevant now, like the chill beats you don't hear as much of. It's not that much about film anymore. I wish it was only 2 hours long that people made video essays. Now it's like so much longer. So things have bloomed even further since I even made that video.
Do you think 2 hours is now a moderate?
I see something 2 hours, I'm like, oh wow, like so concise. Yeah.
Lee, so same question. What was your first kind of entrance into video essays? How did you come to make them?
Okay, so my background was as a journalist, so a traditional print journalist. So I was writing for, newspapers, magazines, websites, and I'd done that for about 10 years. And honestly, I was just getting a bit jaded of that, and about me rather than the industry. And then I started to see the sort of the kind of early lauded video essays come out, mainly from the US. And I'd also had a background in like making short films, so I was, I was interested in editing, and it just suddenly put a little light bulb up for me, and I was like, oh, there's a way to maybe combine the journalism with the sort of editing, very small f filmmaking, and it just really reinvigorated what I was doing professionally. And the certain qualities that you have when you make a video versus a written piece. I talk about this a lot because I'm a big advocate, so I go around and spread the gospel of video essay wherever. But there's a present tenseness to it. When you're sitting there with footage of a film, you don't really do that if you're in a cinema, and you're going to write a review of that movie. You have to go away. Best case, maybe you've got a Blu-ray or a DVD that you could refer to. But when you're sitting with the material that you're going to, do something with, it's this very active present tense thing, and just the sort of fluidity and flexibility of what you can do, with like Grace's great video there, music and graphics and text, and it's not just what some people maybe think of as video essay. You play a clip and you talk over it. It's such an incredibly wide and varied field, which I guess is part of the problem that you're going to encounter with the whole what is it or what isn't it. But anyway, for me, it was just like, wow, I can look at films and talk about them in a completely different way, and it's only due, to the technology, to be able to make it, but then where to put it. And so the whole online part of that was a huge element of, you can put stuff up.
You went put your things on Vimeo first? That's where you sort of started?
No, I have so much admiration for people who've created their own channel and built up an audience of subscribers and stuff. I was fortunate I didn't have to do that because I was already writing for outlets. So for example, like Sight and Sound, I did a video essay for them.
Right, okay.
So that was on their platform, or Little White Lies, or whoever. And so I don't have a YouTube channel. I've got a Vimeo page, which is just a collection of stuff, and occasionally people go to it. But it's like, I don't have to be in that business of garnering a sort of, you know, an audience for me. It's a bit more sort of disparate than that.
So to try to sort of get the parameters of what we mean when we start talking about genre and genre terms in the context of the archive, Natasha, I'm going to ask you to try to tell us why we catalogue genre and how the cataloguing of genre terms has sort of evolved over the history of the BFI archive, if you can.
We catalogue genre because it's one of the main access points that people used to find materials. It's tied in very much with the fundamental reason as to why we do cataloguing, and that is effectively to create a bridge between our users and researchers and the collections that we hold. And it's one of several access points, and it's fundamentally quite a useful one for people because not everybody comes in with a specific film in mind that they want to look up. They maybe want some examples of, well, what horror films? I just want some titles that I can start looking at and things like that. So genre is a particularly useful one for that, but it's also one of the core elements that forms part of the international cataloguing standard for moving images, which is nattily called EN 15744, which is used in conjunction with EN 15907, which deals with the architecture and how you structure that form of data. So it's recognised internationally that things like genre and subject and form are core things that you should have in a basic catalogued record of a moving image.
Oh, so that's an interesting distinction. So the need for genre is recognised, but a list of genres is not,
No.
an international list. You have to
There
sort
is
of
no
provide.
one international list of genres.
So when we have to bring in new genres, well, I suppose that's a little bit, let's go back a little bit. So what is the history of bringing in new genres? We started with a set and then we've changed, the television has come in and now might change again. Is that kind of...
I'll try and make it pithy because it's a very long complex
Yeah.
history of
We've got to
genres at
keep
the
time,
BFI. Basically, fundamentally, before we had computer systems, before 1988, we rarely used genres at all. You would find them on shot list catalogue cards for fiction films mainly, and you would have a drawer that contained lists that were based on sometimes subjects and sometimes genres, reflecting research that individual cataloguers had done in response to researchers coming in and say, I'd like to see a list of all the short documentary films you've got on this subject, and they'd create a list. When we then computerised, those did get put on as genres, but only people in the archive cataloguing acquired items were allowed to use genres. And that's because it started doubling up as a signifier that we had something in the archive. So if everybody who catalogued started using it, you wouldn't be able to then produce printouts for researchers that just targeted those things that we held moving image material for.
Okay, right. So
Right.
it has, Karen.
Then, between 1994 and about 2007, we went from having, I think it's 102 genre terms to 303, something like that.
Ooh,
It
why?
massively increased, and part of that was because of television. So we were collecting more and more television materials. So as we're hitting now, there weren't the genre terms that quite fitted with those. So we needed to create lots of new categories like soap operas and quiz shows, all those sorts of aspects that are purely TV. But we also started doubling up and quadrupling terms as workarounds to limitations to the electronic systems. So you'd start having subtly differently phrased terms meaning the same thing, depending on whether something was fiction or non-fiction, or film or television. So at one point you could have potentially 4 terms which were effectively about the same genre, but only internal people would recognise the subtle distinctions.
It'd be a genre whisperer to sort of understand. Yeah.
As we then moved out and made our systems more publicly accessible, something had to be done about pulling those genre terms into shape, and getting rid of the duplication and making it so that it was actually user-friendly. Because the more terms you have, the less accessible things can get. because the user has to recognise these slight little quirks, has to know how to factor them in, and it was a lot easier to just haul all those into proper order. We also had the problem that a lot of things that were called genres were actually subjects. So again, this is all tied in to workarounds in the system and for historical reasons. So we did a huge piece of work in 2013. The information specialists worked with the curators and the cataloguers to basically haul that list down to 114 now.
Okay. So we're at a good place.
We're at a good place now, and about in the last 10 years, we've only created 3 new genres.
Right.
Well done.
So we have been keeping really strict control.
Yeah, so this
of
is
it.
the sort of strict control we have to try to break through to bring some of these new terms
Yeah.
in. So when we started thinking about video essay, me and Natasha had a conversation, and we immediately sort of watch something and say, well, why isn't this a documentary, or why isn't this a piece of art? So later in your video essay, you start to draw this line, or attempt to draw this line, between what is a video essay and what is, as you say, just art. And you sort of mentioned, it seems like we're getting to a point where anything that remixes or reuses visual work is called a video essay. So I'm going to put you on the spot. So where is this line between video essay and what we might just call moving image work or moving image art?
Yeah, I think something I specifically resented, as I said, like right at the end of the bit you showed, like why am I so upset about it? That because my main thing is like I am an artist. I do the video essays kind of on the side, so I have like a foot in both camps, and I've always really wanted to keep them separate. I have the Vimeo, I have the YouTube. They're different things. Never the twain shall meet. So I was like particularly resentful, I think, about anything that used like moving image material being classed as a video essay just because it is moving image, when it's like we already have moving image as a category within itself. And I think it's the lack of knowledge between those two spaces that you get, like moving image artists who I mean, maybe now it would be different, but at the time they weren't so familiar with video essay. And then you have video essay people who at the time weren't, and probably still aren't, that familiar with like artist moving image. And these people just don't see each other. But anything that they do see, they will claim as their own.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I think it's that, this is me. That I was like, no, this is me. How dare you?
But if you're making something, what are the sort of creative choices you might make that you would think will start pushing something into becoming moving image work
Art.
rather than video essay?
For me, words are very important. I think the essay, people focus so much on the video side that sometimes the essay side gets lost. So I think it should have either words on screen or a narration or a person talking to camera, that you need that essay. Of course, then we get the sort of, you're on the fringe of essay film, which sometimes hasn't had that and has been called essay film. Even as I speak, my my taxonomy is crumbling beneath me.
Yeah. So, you
Yeah.
mentioned the thing about taxonomy, about something we can tick off, which we are kind of trying to do. So we have our first sort of conflict here, words, no words. So does a video essay need to have a voiceover, or can it function without voiceover?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I'm trying to be a devil's advocate. Okay. But I mean, I think, okay, so when I do some stuff with the National Film and TV School where it's almost like introducing video essays to the students there, and actually for them to make a dissertation, a video essay dissertation. And so there's a definition that I use in the presentation. I brought this just because I'll never get the words right otherwise. So the definition that we put up for them is the expression of critical, analytical and theoretical work using the resources of audiovisuality, images and sounds in montage. Now, to me, sorry, that's a really... Yeah, okay, just go with it for now. But that doesn't mean they all have to be in there. So I've seen what I would think of as some really great examples of video essays where there's no narration, there's no on-screen text, but the intent of the analysis and theorizing, maybe just using the clips and putting them in a montage way that sort of is making points or asking questions, to me seems entirely as valid as something that is you know, a person either on screen or just voicing something and saying, let me explain to you why when Hitchcock cuts to this shot, you know, this is what's going on and stuff. So I think, I mean, for me, the beauty of it is how flexible it is as a form. I mean, and the clip you played from Grace's video there, where, you know, I can't remember who she's quoting, but the thing about, you know, borders and border disputes and territory, it's like, well, the beauty of this, you know, if you're a country, you know, there's an argument that you need a border and there needs to be laws that apply to this thing, but this is not that, as far as I'm concerned, which doesn't mean I'm trying to disparage the whole point of this session. You know, it's useful.
That's okay.
No. It's useful to I mean, I think categorization, it helps identify things, it helps explain things, it helps familiarize people. It's really important. But I think the fluidity within that is what is, for me, a huge part of the appeal.
Can we have that?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I did have a version of that written down. It's an interesting one to try and pull apart, but maybe we'll get onto that a bit later. So one of the things you kind of talk about there is, okay, something might have an absence of voiceover, but it is maybe asking questions, or perhaps it's proposing a theory. So there's another part of this defining factor, which is something to do with the sort of intellectual content of a video essay. And we sort of brushed across here, like searching questions or personal theorizing. So do you think it's defined by what it is you're saying? Do you want to...
Because you said that you think that's still valid. I'm like, that is still valid, but it's not a video essay. Like, that's what art does. But like, I intellectually agree with everything you say, and yet in my soul, like, I'm crying. I'm like, no, this isn't right. Which is like the thing that I find most interesting is this need to like try and draw a line around stuff which you really just can't draw a line around, and also what we can get from not having lines, and what comes from seeing something as a video essay or seeing something as art, and how can we sort of extrapolate out from all of those things, and what happens when you put two things next to each other, and how do they interact, like what can we learn from one about the other, which maybe that's the crux of the video essay, is that it can do all those things, very mutable as a form, as much as I hate to admit it, and I want to have my little checklist.
One of the interesting parts of that is, I suppose, whether like the very act of cataloguing is sort of in conflict with a sort of creative and free artistic practice, which is quite challenging for our particular case. So
do it anyway.
But we'll try and do it anyway. I wanted to come back to some more of these sort of divides. So this kind of individual theory thing, this kind of idea that it's a personal format. The other one area that the video essay can start crossing into is kind of documentary and journalism. So I was trying to figure out where the line is there, and sort of struck upon a few different ideas. One of them being that actually it is the filmic techniques that are used. Like once someone gets a camera out and starts going around in the world filming things, are they not making a video essay anymore? Is it fundamental that you have to reuse other people's work, basically, I suppose, is the question. And another two-pronged attack. So do you want to... What's you can start.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think, you know, just to sort of diverge, and I'll come back to it. One of the things a point I like to make about a video essay is it's filmmaking. Like very small f, because you use the production values usually of Hollywood or some amazing cinematography or acting. But typically you then write a script, you're using music, you're choosing graphics and text, you're voicing it, so there's a performance involved. If you do that, it's performance involved. So there's a filmmaking aspect to it. So actually I think it's, and I've seen some really great work where part of the video is what someone, the maker has gone out and filmed material to put alongside it, you know, the clips. So it's not, I think if it was wholly made up of material that you've shot, that maybe is that's maybe, you know, stretching it in a way that feels a bit different. But if you were incorporating your own work into, like, you make a sandwich in that, right?
I did,
and you shot that.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's a really interesting, like, again, what's the point of that? If you're using that with an intent to try and analyze something, or, you know, evoke some questions, and you filming whatever it is within the body of the piece connects to that, then I would say, yeah, go for it. Sure.
How do you feel about that, Grace? What do you think?
I think that's because we've talked before about the American concept of the personal essay, which I think is maybe where I think of an essay as being that more academic citing sources, because like I would write essays for, like, when I was on undergrad, I started the channel like towards the end of my undergrad degree, partly as a way to keep writing essays, but there is also the more sort of personal style of essay writing that is much more informal. It doesn't talk about other people's work. It's more just a theory. It's more sort of philosophical, I guess, than like critical theory, which then it expands the field of video essay even more, and that's definitely come out more, I think, in the kind of YouTube sphere, where you get people really like inserting their like personal joy into what they make, the filming of it. People with like a theatre background or like a film background, people making narratives. That was actually very big before I started, and then I think it's come back again, that people would create sort of fictional worlds and combine talking about film with like making their own film. But yeah, which then like sort of fringes on the entertainment, which is something we've not even mentioned yet. Like, when is it a video essay? When is it entertainment?
What's the scale then? More entertaining, less video essay?
Yeah.
No, that's so good.
Essays can't be entertaining.
Can't be too fun. Can't be too entertaining.
People can't be having fun. This is serious business. But yeah, the YouTube side definitely comes more from the entertainment angle, whereas I think for, as we were saying before about people writing academic papers, you wouldn't see them outside of they wouldn't be seen other than by other academics, whereas now with video essays you've got the option and the sort of accessibility, and I think a lot of people have really leaned into making them entertaining, and
Sure.
I try and make them entertaining, try and make them funny, interesting to watch. I've forgotten the question.
This is good. Yeah, well, it's interesting, this question of entertainment. So much of online content is taking an old form and maybe turning it into a more entertaining version of itself. And one of the other sort of areas of video essay that we started talking about was these kind of 4-hour epics made by people like H. Bomber Guide, and anyone knows him. He'll do these so he makes about one a year. They're 4 hours long. They're heavily researched. But what they really are is mostly him in front of camera, maybe in costume, kind of talking directly to you, talking through an idea or a set of ideas. And we have other ones like Philosophy Tube. Any Philosophy Tube fans in the house? Yeah, there we go. And she's incredibly theatrical, increasingly so, like almost like a play with ideas featured through it. So there's 3 things that I want to put out. First is length. Secondly is on camera. And I've forgotten what the third one is. So we'll just go with 2. So do you feel like brevity is kind of part of the video essay form when you sort of approach it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've made a video longer than maybe 20 minutes, and that was like a really rare thing. I think also, I mean, my situation is slightly different because I tend to get commissioned for an outlet, and therefore there are some sort of not strictures, but they don't want something that's going to be half an hour because it sits on their channel and there's a sort of, an established length of, viewership, etc. If I'm honest, I struggle with the really long ones. I don't want that necessarily from it's also where you're watching it. I don't like watching, long things on a small screen. I'll watch Satan Tango here, because it's going to be on, it's 7 hours, but it's on a big screen. So that's just about my sort of viewing habits. I also do think to sustain something that's continually asking interesting questions and is, innovative or interesting enough audiovisually, that's a big ask. So I don't know that many people sustain it, and I know that the ones you're talking about, and I understand that they have a really devoted viewership, but I'm not part of that.
Well, this is something we spoke about before, which was that maybe the limitations of the video essay in length aren't sort of intellectual, but more just practical. When you were talking about how much time it takes, basically, to make these sort of heavily layered, sort of dense video essays. And that if you were to try to sort of embark on a 4-hour version of that, you might sort of never make it to the end almost.
That would be your life's work.
Yeah, so the length of these videos might not be what makes them not a video essay, but what that length requires from the creator. Natasha, is things like, are we looking at the right categories here? Like, is length something that we use throughout the archive as a sort of defining
It
factor?
can be. I mean, you have a definition of short film we use, which is anything under 40 minutes could be designated as short film. In terms of where I'm coming from in it, I've got to try and create a genre term that cataloguers can use so that our users can actually find and identify and access this material and information, which is why we need the genre term. If we didn't have the genre term field, we'd end up having to put it in the synopsis or some other free text description field just so that people can actually find it, because I get what Grace says about not want, and what you said about not limiting things by tight categorisations, but it's almost like you have to have some sort of term that people can use to find the material, otherwise it remains hidden and they can't find it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to stop you from having as broad or a narrow a definition as you need. So what we're doing at the moment is this discussion on video essay. Is it a genre? Is it a form? Is it a style of documentary? Every time we create a genre term, we always say the first thing you have to do is give me a definition. Or we have to work out a definition so that everybody knows exactly what is meant when that term is used on one of our records, and it's clear then to everybody.
Well, we've only got about 10 minutes left, so do you want to give us your definition again?
Oh God,
Let's
really?
pull it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's really resort to just asking someone.
This is, I don't even know where this, I should know where this came from, but I don't, sorry. So we go with the expression of critical, analytical and theoretical work using the resources of audio-visuality, i.e. images and sounds in montage.
Can you see, I mean, I suppose my first question is there going to be a lot of film work that might fit into that category?
We'd need to, when I said can we have that, it was like, can we
So
utilise bits of that to add to things we've already thought of and come up with like a melded definition that covers quite a wider area, because I think that from that definition you could apply it to films and to TV programmes. So this is where your question of does length come into it? And if length comes into it, then that can clearly be put in there, which would then cut out. So I know when we were having the conversations, I said, well, what about Mark Cousins' films, which have traditionally been called things like visual essays, and they might 9 hours long or whatever, but you could fundamentally say he does exactly that. You've got Waldemar Januszak, who makes his art programmes. They're not strictly speaking historical documentaries about an artist. He's talking about themes and concepts and his own ideas and exploring those. Is it the fact that it's 60 minutes and shown on television? Does that mean that it's not a video essay? Or if it was actually online, would it be designated a video essay? Is the definition where it's broadcast? Is it strictly speaking only online on channels like YouTube? Or is it including streaming channels like Netflix, who've now got their series Voir, which is being cited out there as being, it's video essays. And you think, yeah, okay. And when you actually look at it, it says a Netflix documentary series, visual essays about. So it's like, they look to be samples of video essays. If they were on YouTube, they'd be a video essay. Are they not called that by Netflix because they're part of a series that's streamed by a commercial subscription channel? This is what I'm trying to get at now as well. Video essay. Okay, how can we hone in? What are the factors?
Well, we've definitely shown the problem, if not the solution. But the more time. So, does anyone have any questions they'd like to? Okay, we've got one right in the middle, and one next here. So, I think a microphone is on its way.
I hope this is on.
It is.
Thanks so much. Just wondered if it could be avoided if you can have things under multiple genres at the same time. If something is a documentary and a video essay, but also a documentary and something else, does that not then just not solve the problem? But surely that's how most archives work now. Is that
You can have multiple genres on a record, yeah.
job done?
Except we still need a definition of video essay. If I'm going to, when I said we have a genres thesaurus, it's more accurately a genres and forms thesaurus, because we do have what would strictly be called forms within our genres, because we don't have a separate field for them. So even if we decide whether a video essay is a form rather than a genre, we can still put it in the BFI genres thesaurus and use it.
What are the forms then? This is fiction, non-fiction, and potentially video essay.
Yeah, the genre is like a broad categorisation, which is characterised with similarities of plots and themes, characters. The form is more the form that those type of works can take. So you could have something that's a genre of comedy, but its form would be a short film or an animation, or on a very simple level, fiction or non-fiction.
Yeah.
So you could have something, even if you're not decided, even if it's something that this sort of spans, its borders are fudgy, and it could be a short document, a short film, or it could be a video essay. You can put both on. If the cataloguer decides and assesses it, that's not a problem. But the problem we have is I need a definition, because I need to put a scope note in so that everyone who's cataloguing uses that term in exactly the same way.
Okay, we had, there was a few, do you want to, sorry, I need to,
at the risk of being provocative and almost certainly annoying, can I suggest that maybe Lee's definition is a general definition to describe film in all its forms?
Oh, God. I'm going to have to go rewrite all my notes now. I would say, just to be clear, so this is what we give to people who are then going to go out and make their work, make something. So it's almost for them to have in mind that they need to analyse stuff, they need to bring in theories and then express it in a kind of, audio-visual montage. So I think it kind of, to me, it's almost like the essay, but then stressing the audio-visuality of it, because that's what you would do as a written piece, right? As an undergrad or a master's or whatever, if you were writing a paper, it's going to be about expressing critical and analytical and theory.
Well, it's more of an instruction in some ways.
Yeah, it's almost just trying to give a guideline to people. If they've never done this before, bear these in mind.
Yeah.
And because, otherwise, sometimes people are just like, what do you want me to do? And it's like, well, okay, here's some sort of starting point.
We had here, could we go, I think there's a microphone over there.
Yes, hello. This just harkens back to, when Linnaeus tried to categorize, all the plants and the animals, he wasn't trying to invent a category, he was trying to look for categories that God already made. And so the real question is it even up to us as archivists to find one? You've got to just find out what the actual video essayists think it is, but there's not really any agreement around that either. I'm sure some of you in the audience know about these rather infamous 8-hour-long pieces on iCarly, and people are still arguing about whether those count as video essays or not because they're insufficiently analytical. But with other genres, a bad comedy it's still a comedy, isn't it? And a bad sci-fi is still a sci-fi, and so on. And I think going off from that, well, not really, but more of a tangent. Do you think there's subgenres of video essay? One's a retrospective, and one's more of an analysis, and I think that's all from me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. That's a round of applause in itself, I think. Subgenres of video essay. Yeah, we've got a few minutes if you want to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
One way I was thinking about, and we were talking about this just outside beforehand. For me, one way to look at it, because there can be so many different types, is if you take the subject matter that the video is about. So let's say it's Alfred Hitchcock. And then the video, people who are trying to do work around that, some can be with a voiceover, some can be just, slow motioning Hitchcock sequences. And as long as you think there's something valid about their exploration of that, that could be, for me, a way to do it. So because I don't think it's a genre, I think it's a form. Genre for me is a very sticky word with video essay because it can be so multifaceted. So it's like with Brad Bird, with the guy who made some of the Pixar movies and then did live action. He was always like, people say, "Oh, animation's such a great genre," and it's like it's not. And he gets really upset.
Animation is a genre term in the.
It's a form.
It is a form.
It is a form. Thank you.
No. It is a form. But this is what I'm saying. What we have, our thesaurus, although it's called genres and the field is called genre, it's actually a genre and form thesaurus.
So maybe in the last minute
we do have the two mixed up in the one
found a loophole.
list. We don't have a separate field, so it's almost it's
right, because they're categorized alongside.
And all historical reasons and whatever, it's there. So yeah, it's not a problem. I would say that I was veering towards that video essay was a form. Yes. But in a sense, I don't have to worry too much about whether that is the case or not, because we have a genre and form as thesaurus. I can still put it in there that cataloguers can still use, while everybody else argues about whether it is what it is or isn't. So.
Do you feel content with it being a form?
Yeah.
We're done. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.